uncool cats and beboppers. I am about to show how intensely uncool I am by talking about the Beat Poets and Lawrence Ferlinghetti in celebration of his upcoming 100th birthday. Hi guys, I was so tickled and excited when I read that one of my favorite poets of all time, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, is turning 100 this month. Yes, March 24th, 1919, he was born. And 100 years later, he is still alive, still kicking, still writing poetry, still an active member of the San Francisco scene. So I wanted to take a minute to kind of talk about his life, his legacy, his writing, and just a celebration of all that he has contributed to writing in general, not just to the Beat generation, but all generations. So just a quick rundown of his life. I don't want to get into too many details, but he had kind of, I would imagine, a rough childhood. His dad died before he was even born. He lived with a series of different family members, different economic situations. Eventually, though, going to college and then joining the Naval Reserve. He was a naval officer during World War II. Afterwards, he used the GI Bill to continue his education, earning his PhD. He got married, had a son and a daughter, and he opened City Lights Bookstore in San Francisco, a bookstore that is still around today, in fact. Now, a big notable thing that really shot him and his bookstore and his publishing house into fame was when he published Howl by Allen Ginsberg. Now, Allen Ginsberg was a notable entry in the Beat generation, and the Beatniks were really angry and protesting against World War II. And they felt like there was really nowhere for them to go. They were tired of the conventions and conservatism that was going on in America. And they expressed it in their writing. And so this story, this poem, long poem by Allen Ginsberg, Howl, is almost like a long primal scream. He just lets it all hang out. Now the poem gets a little bit racy. It includes sexual acts, homosexual acts, it includes violence, and of course this caught the attention of conservative lawmakers. And they pointed the finger at Ferlinghetti for obscenity, for distributing and selling and peddling in obscenity, and so there were the Howl trials that went on. Ferlinghetti won. He won, and it really paved the way for free speech, free expression, and paved the way for many other controversial works to be seen, heard, and read since then. Thank goodness that that precedent was set. Now, it's notable that although Ferlinghetti hung out with the Beat poets, published them, was part of that community, he never quite considered himself fully as a Beat poet himself. He rejects the idea that he was part of it. Instead, he says that he was, quote, minding the shop. He was the person who was kind of facilitating them to make their work, even though Ferlinghetti was also writing at this time. Now, I hate to admit it, but I personally feel more than a little bit conflicted about the Beat generation. So back when I was in high school, I was the biggest fan. I thought it was so cool. They were so misunderstood and isolated and raging against the man, and they don't want to become the man, and they could bebop. And I just identified with all of that so much. I thought that they were so deep, so dissatisfied with the status quo, and boy, so was I. Now, as I've grown and gone back and read some of those things, it seems a little bit sometimes self-indulgent, self-congratulatory, selfish, a little bit selfish. Nothing exists for them other than them. They don't really think about the validation that people are able to find in things other than poetry and art and free love and all of this, stuff. But they have their place. They have their place, and apparently women were not really part of that place. Of course, there were a few female Beat writers, but really that was the exception to the norm. I don't know, it's almost like losing your religion. Kind of losing the faith that you had in something that you loved so much. But my love for Ferlinghetti has endured. He was also quite a notable, accomplished artist in his time. I believe maybe he still is. In fact, he has an exhibition coming up in San Francisco very soon. He also has a book coming out soon called Little Boy, and this is what I understand to be as close to an autobiography as we're going to get out of him. So I'm going to read you my favorite poem of his. This is my favorite because my mom read it to me when I was a kid with so much glee and vim and vigor that it just always stuck in my head as my favorite. "Don't let that horse eat that violin," cried Chagall's mother, but he kept right on painting and became famous and kept on painting the horse with violin in mouth. And when he finally finished it, he jumped up upon the horse and rode away, waving the violin. And then with a low bow, gave it to the first naked nude he ran across, and there were no strings attached. So his poetry kind of runs the gamut. Some of it is lighthearted and almost kind of silly, like this one. Some of it is politically charged. He has written poems about Trump. I'll be sure and link to that. The Kitchen Sisters have a good video up of that. And I think it's this just charismatic mix of politics and humor that make his work just so enduring and interesting and just a pleasure to read. So I have to say, as far as poets go, I'm not the most educated person that there is out there. I just know what I like, and what I like is Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Let me know your favorite poets, any of your favorite Ferlinghetti poems, any of your opinions on the Beat Generation. If you want to give me some kind of feedback or set me straight, maybe I've become the man myself, maybe I have become the machine they rage against. It's entirely possible. Thanks as always for watching and indulging my bad poetry reading skills, and I will catch you next time. Bye. They were so misunderstood and isolated and raging against the man, and they don't want to become the man.